Hey, I'm Jeff Hyman, and this is an experiment I've been wanting to try for a long time. I call it Ask a Headhunter. It seems like so many times we would benefit if we could just get an honest, straightforward, no BS answer from a headhunter, whether we are hiring or maybe looking to be hired or maybe both. There's just a perspective that a headhunter gets because all headhunters do is we just do a lot of searches over and over and over. I've done 25 years of them. You can tell by the gray hair that I've seen a lot of things. And so a few days ago, I asked my followers, what kind of questions do you have? And I got a ton. I'm not going to be able to answer all of them, but I put together this little video and we'll see what kind of response we get, and maybe we'll continue to do Ask a Headhunter. So let's dive right in. I'm going to mix up questions from the employer perspective, employee perspective. There's some really pretty thought-provoking, controversial ones too. And if you know me, you know that I am just going to give it to you straight. Whether you agree or not, my job is just to give you my best thinking. So let's dive in. The first question, and I'm just going to read these as we go. As someone with 20 years experience in the same areas, in marketing, direct-to-consumer, how much detail should I provide on my resume for roles that are over 10 years old? I haven't invested much effort in my resume in a lot of years, and my network and recruiters might want to see something more polished. So, great question. I get this all the time. You only get so much room on a resume, but what you may not know is that in a LinkedIn profile, which is often your first interaction with someone, research says that you only get 6 seconds. 6 seconds is nothing, right? It's like this. It's nothing. And so what a lot of people do is they try to cram 10 pounds of junk into a 5-pound bag, and it just doesn't work. So I actually recommend that you focus your LinkedIn profile on your past 6 years of experience, maybe 8 years of experience. Because think of it this way, if a recruiter or a headhunter or an employer is not sufficiently engaged with that recent experience, the last 6 to 8 years, is there really anything before that that's going to make the difference and get them engaged? Probably not. So in those 6 to 8 years of experience, you want to focus on one thing, which are your accomplishments, your achievements, not your job responsibilities or duties. I see this mistake maybe 80% of the time. It's a laundry list of job responsibilities. Well, you can assume that that headhunter, that recruiter already knows what a product manager job is, or what a sales regional manager does, or even a CFO. What they want to see, what I want to see, are quantifiable achievements, accomplishments. Show me the impact that you made on that business. That's what's going to make the difference and make that recruiter want to get on the phone or on a video call with you. Okay, let's go to the next question. On average, how long does it take to fill a role from entry level to executive? So I actually dug this up, and I'm going to tell you some ways to shorten it in a minute. For CEO searches, it can easily be over 6 months. You are looking for that little perfect unicorn, and it can take that long. Shouldn't, but it often does. An executive level, typically 2 to 4 months, and an entry level or junior level, typically 1 to 2 months. So those are kind of the typical ranges, 1 month and up, but it could be, I've seen some that are a year. But it doesn't have to take that long. Let me tell you the 4 mistakes that people make that really drags out the recruitment process. The first is not knowing what you're looking for before you start, which sounds super basic, right? I'm looking for a sales rep, or I'm looking for a product manager. If you take the time to list out a scorecard, which takes just 30 minutes of exactly what you're looking for, when you see it, you will know right away, right? But if you play this, I'll know it when I see it, you really can drag things out. The search kind of prolongs unnecessarily. The second mistake is having too many cooks in the kitchen, too many interviewers. Google did a long-term retrospective study and found that 4 is the optimal number of interviewers, just 4. But I see companies that have 6 or 8 or 14 or 40 interviewers. No wonder the search takes forever. What Google found was that over 4 interviewers, you only get 1% more predictive with every interviewer that you add. So you risk losing great candidates. You certainly provide a worse candidate experience just for the sake of a tiny bit more accuracy. So I encourage you to stick with 4 and you'll speed up your process. Next is to know your maximum compensation up front. Know how much you can spend. What is my budget? And then focus on candidates who currently earn 20% less than that. And that will ensure that when you find the right person, they're highly likely to take the job. What happens is if you focus on people that are too experienced, well, as you can imagine, you're often going to fall in love with their candidate. You get to the end of the process only to find out you can't afford them. And that really is where the last tip comes in, which is always have a backup candidate. The search is never over until the person is in the job. We are at about a 66% offer acceptance rate, which means 1 in 3 of your offers may be declined. And so if you find that one perfect person, you lose them for whatever reason, money or otherwise, you have to restart the entire process. And that's what causes these searches to take months and months. So never stop. Always look for 2 people, and you'll guaranteed to get at least one of them. Let's go to the next question. How much do headhunters earn per year? What's the average? What's the bottom of the range, top of the range? I haven't seen data published on this, so I can't give you exact numbers, but I know some headhunters who earn well over $1 million a year, so it can pay really well as a profession. God bless America, right? But more typical is probably 50 to 500,000. I know that's a big range. Junior level recruiters who are just getting started, 50K to 75K can be a good year. If you're at one of the bigger firms, it could be $250,000 to $500,000. But you have to remember that for many headhunters, they give half or approximately half of what they make to the house, right? For using their brand name, using their resources, their computers, etc., versus individual recruiters who keep everything. So it really is a big range. Okay, let's go to the next question. I've been with the same company for most of my career, and I hold an equity position that I would be giving up if I moved on. Is there an easy way to determine or vet opportunities in the market that are at my career stage and comp level? So I don't want to take a lot of risk, essentially, is what he's saying. It is important to get a feel for the market from time to time, especially if you're going to lose unvested equity if you leave your company. Now, if you're vested, you should be fine. But if you're unvested, you're walking away from some potential payout. It's important to see what you're worth on the market, but it does take time. So what I recommend is go about it almost exactly the opposite of what most people do. So what most candidates do is they play the numbers and they click on apply on every job board. And statistically, you're highly unlikely not just to get the job, but even get an interview. It's just not the way to maximize your odds. What does work, however, is to, and I'll include this in the show notes, a link to a webinar that I did recently on this. Pick 20 to 30 companies that you're incredibly passionate about, find the hiring manager, and go after them in a very direct engagement or a very direct outreach. And this webinar kind of talks about how to do that, how to find their email address and what to say, and I'll link that in the show notes. But if you go about it that way, you'll be able to see what you're worth in the market without blowing your cover and risking that confidentiality. And you also have a much better shot versus applying to jobs on job boards, which is just typically goes no place. Okay, next question. I just accepted an offer at a Canadian private equity-owned software company as a chief product officer. They insisted that I give 3 months' notice when I leave in the employment agreement. How often do you see this? Well, first of all, you've already accepted the job, which means you've signed, which means the question is a little bit late. So, next time, make sure your employment attorney is reading and negotiating this stuff. But I'll answer the question anyway. Look, when you give a commitment to give a certain amount of notice, that is a moral commitment, right? Probably more than even a legally enforceable commitment. 2 weeks, of course, in the U.S. is pretty traditional, unless you're going to a direct competitor, in which case quite often you'll be walked directly to the door. 4 weeks, giving 4 weeks notice is generous. 3 months is a lot, right? That is a long enough period that there should be some meaningful compensation tied to it. And I say that because there's going to be a lot of companies out there that as soon as you disclose, I have to give my employer 3 months notice. Those companies are not going to be willing to wait. 3 months is a lifetime in a lot of industries, no matter how good your skills. So you're going to lose opportunities. You really are going to leave money on the table, which means there should be some compensation mechanism tied to giving 3 months notice. And in addition, if you're agreeing to give the company 3 months notice, they should be agreeing to give you 3 months notice as well in the form of severance, right? Or some kind of downside protection. So I would be very hard pressed to tell you that you would sign that, even though it sounds like you already did. 3 months is a lot of notice in the U.S. Let's go to the next question. I've been very career-oriented and will always set aside a place in my life for grappling with challenging problems. Like many, the pandemic has caused me to reevaluate a lot of things in my life, to reorient my priorities. I'm considering what another path might look like. I've thought about working every other week, working 2 days a week, 3 months on off, etc. Can a candidate approach a job search with expectations like these without being seen as a non-team player? So the answer is yes, of course. You want what you want, and as long as financially you can make that work, you shouldn't settle. I think one thing the pandemic has taught all of us, myself included, is to really reevaluate your life priorities. What are you willing to put up with? What are you willing to do, not do? Are you willing to have a long commute, a micromanaging boss, whatever it may be? But you have to be realistic that most companies, unless it's just a part-time consulting or contracting engagement, where that's all that's expected, companies want and need all of you. And that's not because they're evil, it's because they got a business to run, right? They need to know that they can count on you to achieve a certain result, a certain deliverable, whether it's making the number if you're in sales or delivering something if you're in marketing or product, whatever it may be. So I would encourage you to find those companies and engage in a discussion, but probably not disclose it in the very first meeting, right? Make sure there's some kind of mutual fit. But then early in the discussion, maybe the second or third meeting, tell them your constraints. And if they are willing to work with those, and you'll be surprised right now in this market, I'm seeing a lot of companies do things they normally wouldn't do because they are looking for talent. So the job seeker right now has a lot of leverage. At the same time, there's not going to be a ton of companies that are open to that structure, that are open to less than all of you. So consulting is a great path, right? You can earn more per hour than you can typically in a full employment situation, as long as you don't mind devoting part of every week, week in and week out, to rainmaking. You're always looking for your next project, your next engagement. So if you're willing to do that, I think looking at committing to just a consulting path makes a whole lot of sense. Okay, next one. I own and operate a small law firm that I founded in 2009. We specialize in real estate and bankruptcy. After years of working on the business, not in the business, the firm is doing fine. The money's okay, but not great. I'm wondering what other opportunities might be out there for me. Well, research says that your best opportunity is to take what you've built and take it to the next level. Now, that's something you have to want to do and have to have the skills to do. In the case of a law firm, it might mean recruiting more partners to increase the base. It might mean doing more marketing to increase your funnel and lead generation, or it might mean expanding into other areas, right, from bankruptcy to real estate to litigation, etc. Most people will tell you, and my experience has been, that your time is best spent refining and expanding that business that you've already got because it's already successful, it's already profitable, versus taking your eye off the ball to find something else when you may find that this kind of fizzles and now you've got kind of two half-assed situations. So that would be my recommendation. All that said, if you're in law and you want to make more money, a very viable way to do that is called of counsel. And what that basically means is you continue to work at your firm, but you let other firms, maybe in the same geography or the same specific nature, let them know that you have extra capacity to take on more work, and they'll add you to their Of Counsel network, where they call you and they split the revenue or the fees with you. That's another way to do it if you choose not to do it in your own firm. Let's go to the next question. Totally different one. How do you screen for millennial entitlement? This is a question I get from a lot of hiring managers and HR leaders, especially older ones, folks in their 40s, 50s, etc. And, I know a lot of millennials. I don't think of it as entitlement. That hasn't been my experience. They are a different group of people, but people have the same basic needs. Just go back to Maslow's pyramid. But many millennials do derive a disproportionate of satisfaction from things other than just work. It may be a cause or making an impact or making a difference in the world. It might be work-life integration. The world has moved on, and these types of things are really important to millennials. So you can kind of get with the program if you're hoping to employ millennials, and you are, because this is going to be the bulk of the workforce over the next 10, 20, 30 years, or you're going to have problems. There are some great books on this topic. My favorite is Not Everyone Gets a Trophy, which is all about how to manage the millennials. Great book. There's a bunch of others out there. I just don't think you have got much of a choice. I think the reality is the work world is changing, and if you don't change with it, you're going to be toast. You're going to be at a competitive disadvantage when it comes to recruiting, because your employees are your first customer, right? No matter what business you're in, and not just restaurants. If you're in software development, if you're in consumer products, it doesn't matter. Your employees are your first customers. You've got to acquire them. You've got to keep them, develop them, and get them to give back to the company and feel connected. And that sense of connection for millennials really is more than just the work. It also, by the way, is career path, and are they learning? And that's a topic for another day. Last question that we're going to do today. It's a buyer's market. Candidates are the buyers. But can employers be too appeasing? Can they be a little too patient with employers? And I think yes, right? We all have our limits. You need to know what your limit is, what you're willing to do, what you're willing to give, whether it's office hours, days in the office, required vaccinations or masking or whatever it may be. You as leader need to decide what you and your leadership team are willing to do and able to do. And then communicate it up front so that candidates can opt out or your employees can opt out, and you don't waste time. Others will be drawn to what you can offer or the way you've structured it. I like to say there's a lid for every pot when it comes to love and when it comes to recruiting. And what's happening right now is something that I've never seen before, which is this great reshuffling. You've got a whole bunch of employers putting in place policies and procedures and requirements that some of their employees and candidates don't agree with. Those people are resigning and going to these companies that are executing a different way, whether it's remote or in office, whatever it may be. These employees are picking up and going to these companies. It really is a great reshuffling like I have never seen. So don't think you're going to please all the people all the time, and don't try to. Don't break. You should flex, but you shouldn't break what's important to you, to your business, to your culture. And the worst thing you can do is wait, right? You really need to take action now and make these decisions that so many companies, I think, have been just kind of putting off, thinking that one day soon, whether it's Q2, Q3, the pandemic is going to subside, be an ancient history, and then we'll go back to the way it was. We're never going back, or no time soon. So getting with this new reality is important. That doesn't mean you need to change your company, turn it upside down for candidates, but if you don't, you're certainly going to lose some, and that's fine, because you'll pick up others. But the worst thing you can do right now, I think, is inaction and waiting to make these decisions. So I hope that was helpful. We covered a lot of questions. Ask a headhunter. Ask a headhunter. If you have questions, send me an email. I'd love to hear it. Just send me an email, ask@recruitrockstars.com. Where is it here? Yeah, ask@recruitrockstars.com. And I'll put a bunch more questions together, and I'll do this again, and we'll see what you guys think. I'd love any feedback you got. Bye.